My husband suddenly became attentive and brought us freshly squeezed juice with breakfast in bed, but the smell of the juice made me uneasy, and I quietly swapped our glasses. And 5 minutes later, before we continue, please write which country you're watching the video from. Enjoy listening. Ekaterina was accustomed to the prickly silence that had settled over their apartment. For the past few years, her marriage to Oleg had been more like a truce on depleted land than a union of two loving hearts. Arguments had become less frequent, not due to a resolution of conflicts, but rather due to a resigned acceptance, as if each of them had come to terms with the inevitability of coexisting. Oleg increasingly stayed late at work, citing new projects. Ekaterina, weary of his detachment, found solace in her conversations with her friend Irina and in managing the household. And then, like a bolt from the blue, a change occurred. It began with a bouquet of roses, crimson ones with long stems, which Oleg suddenly presented to Ekaterina upon returning from work. "Just because," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. This was followed by a dinner he had personally prepared. Pasta carbonara, the very dish he used to make at the beginning of their relationship. Ekaterina watched his efforts with surprise, trying to decipher the reason for such sudden generosity. Had he felt a pang of conscience, or was there something else behind it? Each day brought new tokens of affection. Oleg became more attentive, inquired about her well-being, and offered help around the house. He even began to recall details of their shared past and recounting stories they had experienced together. Ekaterina felt like the heroine of an old film, where lost love returns after a long separation. But alongside joy, suspicion began to creep into her heart. The change was too abrupt. His attentiveness seemed too unnatural. This morning, Oleg surpassed all her expectations. Ekaterina woke to a gentle touch on her shoulder. Opening her eyes, she saw Oleg standing by the bed with a tray in his hands. "Good morning, my love," he purred, placing the tray on the bedside table. "I've prepared breakfast for you in bed." On the tray was a plate of toast, croissants, and 2 glasses of freshly squeezed juice. The bright orange color of the juice contrasted pleasantly with the whiteness of the linen napkins. "Oleg, what is this?" Ekaterina asked in surprise, propping herself up on the pillow. "I just wanted to spoil you," Oleg replied with a smile. "You work so hard. You need to rest and regain your strength." "Thank you, that's very sweet," Ekaterina said, trying to hide her disbelief. She picked up one of the croissants and took a bite. It was delicious. Then she picked up a glass of juice and brought it to her face. The fresh, fruity aroma pleasantly tickled her nostrils, but something about the aroma was off. A strange, slightly bitter undertone mingled with the scent of oranges. Ekaterina frowned. "Is something wrong?" Oleg asked, watching her. "No, everything's fine," Ekaterina replied, trying not to betray her suspicions. "It just has a slightly unusual taste." She took a small sip. The bitter taste immediately burned her tongue. Ekaterina barely suppressed a gag. "What is it? What did you put in the juice?" "You don't like it?" Oleg asked, frowning. "I squeezed the oranges myself." "No, not at all. It's great," Ekaterina assured him, placing the glass back on the tray. "I'm just not fully awake yet. I'll drink it in a moment." She felt her heart pounding wildly in her chest. Her intuition screamed of danger. She didn't trust Oleg, didn't believe in his sudden concern, and this bitter aftertaste in the juice only intensified her suspicion. Ekaterina realized she needed to act quickly and cautiously. She couldn't let Oleg suspect she knew anything. She had to find out what he was planning and protect herself. Meanwhile, Oleg picked up the glass of juice that was closer to him and brought it to his lips. Ekaterina held her breath. Now or never. "Wait," she exclaimed, feigning a stumble. "I wanted to add a little honey to my juice. You know I like it sweeter." She quickly grabbed both glasses, and while Oleg looked at her in surprise, deftly swapped them. Now the glass with the poisoned juice was in front of Oleg, and the glass with the clean juice was in front of her. "This will taste better," Ekaterina said, smiling radiantly. "Enjoy." Oleg, unsuspecting, took a large sip of the juice, his face immediately contorted with disgust. Oleg clutched his throat, trying to cough. Ekaterina watched him, saying nothing. She saw Oleg lose control of his body. Less than 10 minutes after breakfast, Oleg suddenly clutched his stomach, doubling over. His face was contorted in a grimace of pain. Cold sweat broke out. Ekaterina, though tormented by suspicion, couldn't hide her fear. "Oleg, what's wrong?" she asked, trying to inject her voice with genuine concern. "My stomach hurts terribly," he rasped, slithering off the bed and onto the floor. Ekaterina, after a moment's hesitation, rushed to the phone. She called an ambulance, informing the dispatcher about her husband's sudden and severe abdominal pain. While waiting for the doctors, Oleg moaned and thrashed on the floor, unable to find a comfortable position. Ekaterina watched him with conflicting emotions. Fear for his condition mingled with suspicion and even relief. Yes, relief at the realization that she had perhaps avoided a terrible fate. The ambulance arrived quickly. Oleg was carried out on a stretcher, hooked up to an IV. Ekaterina went with him, trying to play the role of a loving and worried wife. In the ambulance, she discreetly observed Oleg, trying to decipher what had actually happened. At the hospital, Oleg was immediately taken for examination. Ekaterina waited in the corridor, nervously fidgeting with her phone. After an hour, the doctor emerged. "Your husband's condition is stable, but serious," he said. "He has severe poisoning. Traces of a potent sedative and alcohol were found in his blood. The combination of these substances could have led to serious consequences. We are currently conducting detoxification and monitoring his condition." Ekaterina turned cold. Sedative, alcohol. She remembered the slightly bitter taste of the juice, Oleg's strange attentiveness. Everything fell into a horrifying picture. "Doctor, what could have caused such poisoning?" she asked, trying to sound innocent. "It's difficult to say for sure," the doctor replied, shrugging. "Perhaps he accidentally took medication incompatible with alcohol. Or it was done intentionally. Law enforcement agencies will be looking into this now." After speaking with the doctor, Ekaterina felt completely shattered. She needed to talk to someone, to share her fears and suspicions. She took out her phone and dialed Irina's number. "Irina, I need your help," she said as soon as her friend answered. "Oleg is in the hospital." "What? How did it happen?" Irina exclaimed. Ekaterina briefly recounted the breakfast, the strange taste of the juice, and the doctor's words. "Irina, I think that juice was meant for me," she finished in a trembling voice. "I'm sure Oleg was trying to kill me." Silence ensued. Ekaterina could hear Irina breathing heavily on the line. "Katya, that's terrible," Irina finally said. "Are you sure? This needs to be investigated. I can test the juice. Bring me the remnants, if there are any. And by the way, try not to touch anything in the apartment. There might be evidence there." "Okay," Ekaterina replied. "I'll go home right away and look for the juice remnants. Thank you, Irina. You're the only one I can trust." Returning home, Ekaterina went straight to the kitchen. The glasses from breakfast were still sitting in the room. She carefully took the one Oleg had drunk from and poured the remaining juice into a clean jar. Then she put on gloves and thoroughly examined the entire kitchen, trying not to touch anything. In the trash can, she found an empty orange juice carton. There was nothing else suspicious. With the jar of juice, Ekaterina drove to Irina's. Her friend was waiting for her at the pharmacy. They went to the back room, where Irina kept the necessary equipment for tests. "Let's see what's mixed in there," Irina said, putting on gloves and a lab coat. "The results will be ready in a couple of hours. In the meantime, tell me everything in detail. Don't hold anything back." Ekaterina recounted everything that had happened over the past week. In Ekaterina's mind, like snippets of an old film reel, memories surfaced. Flashes of their life together with Oleg. Happy moments, quarrels, a period of estrangement, and finally, this sudden, suspicious attentiveness. All of it now seemed part of some sinister plan that she was only now beginning to understand. She remembered an incident that happened 2 days ago. Ekaterina had stayed late at work, preparing an important report. Returning home, she saw light in Oleg's study. The door was ajar, and she inadvertently overheard a snippet of his phone conversation. "Yes, everything is proceeding according to plan. The policy will work soon. The main thing is that it all looks natural. The desired date is fast approaching. At the time, she hadn't given it much thought, dismissing it as some work-related matters. Oleg often had phone negotiations, and she tried not to interfere. But now, after the poisoning, those words sounded like a death sentence. The policy will work. The desired date. These phrases echoed in her head, painting a terrifying picture. Ekaterina shivered. Now she understood what policy Oleg was talking about. It was her life insurance taken out very recently for a substantial amount. He had so persistently urged her to sign the documents. At the time, it had seemed like a manifestation of care, albeit a bit belated. Now she understood that it was cold calculation. Ekaterina closed her eyes, trying to quell her trembling. How could she have been so blind? How could she not have noticed that she was living next to a monster? All the signs were there. His coldness, detachment, constant lateness at work, suspicious phone calls. She attributed it all to fatigue, business problems, anything but admitting to herself that her marriage was falling apart, and he, meanwhile, was weaving his web, preparing to strike the fatal blow. Irina finished analyzing the juice after 2 hours. Her face was serious as she turned to Ekaterina. "Katya, I confirm," she said. "The juice contains a potent sedative, incompatible with alcohol. The dose is large enough to cause serious consequences, even death. And what's most frightening, this sedative is not sold over the counter without a prescription. Someone deliberately obtained it for him." Ekaterina couldn't believe that the man she loved and trusted could do such a thing to her. Oleg's betrayal was so monstrous that she couldn't find words to express her pain and disappointment. "What should I do, Irina?" she asked, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know where to go or whom to trust." "You have to go to the police, Katya," Irina replied. "You have evidence. You can't let this go. Oleg must be held accountable for what he's done." Ekaterina knew Irina was right. She couldn't let Oleg get away with it, but she was afraid. Afraid of the police, the court, the publicity. Afraid that no one would believe her. "I'll think about it," she said, trying to hide her fear. "I need time to process everything." "All right," Irina replied, "but don't delay. The sooner you go to the police, the more likely you are to prove his guilt. And remember, I'm always here. I'll help you in any way I can." The next day, Ekaterina went to the hospital. She sat on a hard chair in the hospital corridor, staring blankly. The white walls, the smell of medicine, it all weighed on her, intensifying her already agonizing sense of confusion and fear. Irina, who had accompanied her, sat beside her, her arm around her shoulders, but even her support couldn't drown out the growing anxiety. At that moment, an investigator in a sharp suit appeared in the corridor. It was Litvinov, the same one handling Oleg's poisoning case. He approached Ekaterina and Irina. "Ekaterina Sergeyevna, may I have a moment of your time? I have a few questions." Ekaterina rose from her chair, feeling everything inside her constrict with tension. She knew this conversation wouldn't be easy. She would have to tell Litvinov everything she knew, all her suspicions. She would have to trust him and hope that he could help her. Litvinov led her into his office, a small room with grey walls and minimal furniture. On the desk lay a folder of documents, and on the wall hung a diagram, crisscrossed with arrows and notations. "Please sit down," Litvinov offered, gesturing to a chair. "I understand this is difficult for you, but we need to understand what happened." Ekaterina sat down, trying to maintain her composure. Litvinov looked at her intently. "I am aware of your husband's poisoning," he began, "and of your suspicions. Irina Andreevna has provided me with the results of the juice analysis." Ekaterina nodded. "I want to tell you everything," she said. "Everything I know." And she began to recount Oleg's strange behavior, his sudden attentiveness, the suspicious phone call, the insurance policy, and the will. She detailed all the circumstances that had raised her suspicions. Litvinov listened attentively, without interrupting, only occasionally asking clarifying questions. He jotted something down in his notebook, his gaze never leaving Ekaterina. When she finished, silence filled the room. Litvinov put down his pen and looked at Ekaterina. "Do you have any documents to support your statements?" he asked. The insurance policy? The will? Yes, Ekaterina replied. They should be at home. I can bring them. That would be very helpful, Litvinov said. And also, Ekaterina Sergeyevna, I will need to speak with your husband as soon as his condition stabilizes. Ekaterina flinched. She dreaded the thought of seeing Oleg again, of talking to him, of looking him in the eye, but she understood it was necessary. I understand, she said. I'll do whatever it takes. Litvinov nodded. Very well, then I will let you go. Ekaterina thanked Litvinov and left the office. Irina was waiting for her in the corridor. She immediately understood from Ekaterina's face that the conversation had been difficult. What did he say? Irina asked. He said he needs the documents, Ekaterina replied. Let's go to my place, Irina offered. You can't stay alone right now, and tomorrow morning we'll go to your place together and get the documents. Ekaterina agreed. She felt utterly exhausted and drained. She needed time to recover and gather her strength. The next morning, Ekaterina sat in investigator Litvinov's office, trying to quell the tremor in her hands. After everything that had happened, she felt fragile, like a porcelain doll about to shatter into tiny pieces. But inside, despite the fear and pain, a firm resolve was growing. Litvinov carefully examined the documents she had brought, a copy of the insurance policy, the will, the results of the juice analysis provided by Irina. His gaze, sharp and calm, seemed to see right through her. Ekaterina, he said, setting the papers aside, we have thoroughly reviewed all the materials you provided. The analysis confirmed the presence of a potent sedative in the juice remnants. The composition and concentration indicate that this was not an accident, but deliberate poisoning. Ekaterina took a deep breath, as if shedding a heavy burden. The confirmation of her suspicions brought both relief and a new wave of horror. What's next? She asked, trying to speak evenly. Next is our work, Litvinov replied. Based on the collected evidence, we will detain Oleg Vladimirovich after his recovery and charge him with attempted murder for financial gain. Ekaterina closed her eyes. She pictured Oleg sitting in a cell, realizing the collapse of his plan, but instead of satisfaction, she felt only emptiness. We also discovered that Oleg Vladimirovich was experiencing severe financial difficulties. His business was on the verge of bankruptcy, and his debts were growing like a snowball. The insurance payout was his only way out. Litvinov paused, giving Ekaterina time to absorb what she had heard. When will the trial be? She asked. It will take some time, Litvinov replied. We need to conduct all necessary investigative actions, gather evidence, and question witnesses, but I assure you, we will do everything possible to ensure he receives just punishment. Very well, she stated firmly. Litvinov nodded approvingly. In the meantime, he said, handing her a business card, if you need anything, call any time, and be careful. We don't rule out the possibility that Oleg may have had accomplices. Ekaterina took the business card and put it in her purse. Leaving the investigator's office, she felt a little lighter. The worst seemed to be over, but ahead lay the trial, public exposure, and most importantly, a new life. In the evening back home, Ekaterina dialed Irina's number. Irina, it's me, she said, hearing her familiar voice on the line. He'll be arrested after he recovers. Katyusha, I'm so glad, Irina exclaimed. I knew it would happen. You're a brave one for not being afraid. Thank you, Irina, Ekaterina replied. If it weren't for you, I don't even know what would have happened. Don't be silly, Irina interrupted. You're strong. You would have managed, but the main thing is that it's over. Now you need to rest and think about the future. I am thinking about it, Ekaterina replied. I've decided to leave. To leave for another city, far from here, to start all over again. Irina paused for a moment, then said, That's sensible. I understand, but know that I'll always be here. Thank you, Irina. You're a true friend. The following weeks flew by in a flurry of activity. Ekaterina packed her belongings, handled paperwork, and sold her apartment. She tried not to think about the past, focusing on the future. On the day of her departure, Irina came to see her off at the train station. They hugged for a long time, saying goodbye. "Call me, don't forget," Irina said, wiping away tears. "I will, absolutely," Ekaterina replied. "And you come visit me." The train pulled away, and Ekaterina looked out the window. The city where she had lived for many years gradually disappeared from view. She felt sadness, but also hope. In her new city, Ekaterina rented a small apartment and found a job, but the past wouldn't let her go. From time to time, she had nightmares. She flinched at every phone call and feared every stranger. One evening, Ekaterina was sitting in the kitchen, drinking tea. Suddenly the phone rang. "Ekaterina Sergeyevna," she heard a familiar voice. It was Litvinov. Ekaterina turned cold. "Has something happened?" she asked, trying to speak evenly. "The trial for Oleg Vladimirovich has been scheduled for next month," Litvinov replied. "Your presence is required." Ekaterina fell silent. She didn't want to return to this city, didn't want to see Oleg again, didn't want to go through all of this again. "I'll come," she said finally. "I have to do this." On the day of the trial, Ekaterina felt hollow. She stood before the courthouse, took a deep breath, and walked inside. The courtroom was crowded. Journalists, Oleg's relatives, the simply curious. Ekaterina tried not to look at anyone, focusing on what lay ahead. When Oleg was brought into the courtroom, she felt her breath catch. He looked gaunt and older, but a fire of hatred still burned in his eyes. The trial lasted several days. Ekaterina gave detailed testimony, recounting everything that had happened. She spoke calmly and confidently, not allowing her emotions to get the better of her. Oleg denied his guilt, but the evidence was too convincing. In the end, the court found him guilty of attempted murder and intentional poisoning. He was sentenced to a long prison term. When the verdict was announced, Ekaterina felt a sense of relief. Justice had prevailed. Leaving the courtroom, she saw Litvinov. "It's all over, Ekaterina Sergeyevna," he said, shaking her hand. "You can rest assured." "Thank you," Ekaterina replied. "Thank you for everything." She returned to her new city and began to live her life. She no longer felt apprehension, nor did she cast glances backward. No, she possessed an inner knowing of her own resilience and her capacity to surmount any challenge. Time marched onward. Ekaterina dedicated herself to her work, managed her household, and actively sought contentment. One day, after the passage of several years, a letter arrived. It bore the unmistakable mark of Oleg. In its lines, he confessed to a dawning awareness of his transgressions, expressed profound remorse for his past actions, and earnestly implored her forgiveness. Ekaterina read the missive, her thoughts adrift for an extended period. The question of whether she could ever extend absolution to him remained unresolved, yet she made the firm decision to release the past. With a decisive movement, she discarded the letter into a waste receptacle and firmly closed the door behind her, stepping into an uncharted future.